So the other day I was trying to figure out what stock to do a review video of next. And so I'm scrolling through the comments in my videos trying to see what you guys are talking about. And I got to be honest, Airbnb is looking like the most requested stock right now, which does surprise me a little bit, but at the same time, I gotta say, it makes perfect sense considering a couple things. Number one, the company as a whole is becoming very popular and very trendy right now. I think we all know various people, including maybe friends and family, who either use the app as an alternative to hotels when they go out and travel, or we might even know some people who are renting out their house or their apartment to generate some extra income through Airbnb. Number two, despite that huge and growing popularity, we've actually been seeing the stock crash in recent months by around 35%. And a big reason why is because of the global health issue and the fears of this new variant that could maybe send us into lockdowns. There's a rising fear of that. And that, along with the fact that they're not profitable and other concerns, really just sent the stock crashing in recent months. So the question is, are those fears overblown, and is right now the perfect time to jump into this high growth stock as a long-term investment? Or is it still too risky, too speculative, and too unprofitable to be taking a gamble on at this time? Well, let's find out together right now. What's up, everyone? My name is Ale. Welcome back to my world of stocks. By the way, let me know down below how you feel about Airbnb, and let me know also what other stock you would like me to review next. But with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at the company. Let's look at their financials, their future potential, and of course the stock. And I'll let you know if I plan on buying this one myself anytime soon as a long-term investment. Okay, so just a really quick intro into the company in case you've never heard of them, although I highly doubt that's the case, as almost everyone has either stayed at an Airbnb or at least looked into one when planning some sort of trip. But what Airbnb does is pretty simple. They're basically an alternative to hotels, but instead of owning the properties themselves, they just facilitate the market between a host and a guest, where literally both of them can be just regular people like you and me. Now, the host is someone who wants to rent out either an extra bedroom they have or maybe an entire apartment or house in order to make some extra income. And they can even do something called experiences, where they guide you through some kind of special activity, or maybe they know a lot about the place you're traveling to, so they set up some kind of special event or experience for you, or maybe they kind of guide you through something. Which, by the way, Airbnb recently added an online version of this since so many people were staying home because of the pepperoni global health issue. But then you have the guest, which is basically a renter. Now, this is someone who is taking a trip either by themselves or maybe with a group of people, and they can just download the Airbnb app, put in a location, look at what houses are available, and read reviews of the host and what they offer, and then book their stay all through the app. It's pretty simple. It's like basically like a booking agency kind of thing. And if there are any issues, you can always talk to Airbnb customer service or even just directly with the host. Now, this is usually a cheaper alternative to hotels too, since hotels have a lot of overhead costs, and regular people renting out their homes are able to compete on price because a lot of the time it's not their main source of income, so they'll lower their price and give you a cheaper option. There's also the benefit of getting specific things you might be looking for, like maybe you want a full house to rent with your friends or family, maybe you want a full kitchen, a full living room, maybe you want some laundry machines, etc. Plus, you also get to live like a local in a residential area, and a lot of times you find unique setups like a tree house or a houseboat or whatever else. It can be very appealing to certain people. Plus, you might also be looking at a specific location where there are no good hotel options, but there may still be some Airbnbs in the area that can better fill your needs. By the way, hotels are sometimes listed too on Airbnb, so just keep that in mind. But the overall business model here is to connect the users with the host or whoever is renting it out, and charge a fee for that. I think right now Airbnb collects a fee of like 15% for the booking. So it's a pretty simple business model overall, and it's been working for them very well so far. According to their website, they already have over 4 million hosts, providing over 5.5 million active listings, of which Airbnb claims that the majority of them are only listed exclusively on their platform, meaning they haven't really experienced a lot of competition yet, which I'll talk more about a little later. But thanks to also being a global service that is used across more than 220 countries and regions, and I think like over 100,000 cities, their user base has been growing every year. Bookings soared by almost 100% in 2019 and was quickly approaching 300 million before the global health issue of 2020 sent that number crashing by almost 30%. This correlates almost perfectly with their sales that also crashed by pretty much the same amount that year. However, a huge rebound is expected now that things are starting to kind of go back to normal, as analysts project a record breaking year for both this year and the next, with growth of almost 60% and 30% respectively. There is concern though that the D variant of the pepperoni could send us all back into lockdowns. There's even certain places internationally that have already put some of this in place. But that would probably be very rough on Airbnb since they depend so heavily on traveling, so it is a concern to be aware of. Still, I personally don't think we'll be going back to lockdowns in any major way, especially here in the United States. I could be wrong, but that's just kind of my gut feeling as V shots continue to ramp up, and they do seem to have at least some positive effect on the severity of it. So I just think we're gonna have to kind of learn to live with this thing. But I don't know. I'm kind of being cautious here. I don't want to go deep into the pepperoni subject because I know people get very angry and kind of tribal over it. So I'll just kind of leave that aside. Regardless, it's also nice to know that Airbnb isn't entirely dependent on traveling as you might think of it. In the first quarter of this year, almost a quarter of their bookings were long-term stays, meaning those people booked an Airbnb for at least an entire month. I mean, this is like almost renting a place as your actual home for at least a shorter period of time. And that number seems to be growing as it's up from just 14% in 2019. My suspicion is that because so many people are able to work from home now, they might be traveling around and kind of living in different areas to kind of explore a little bit, or maybe it's just because it's so much more convenient than hotels for longer stays. So maybe this is kind of market share that is perhaps being stolen from hotels. But whatever it is, it's clearly helping Airbnb's business. I mean, even half of all their bookings were of at least 1 week or longer. So I really think you're seeing people consider Airbnb as a good alternative to hotels, especially when taking a longer trip or vacation. And preference over hotels for some people seems to only be going up over time because coming off of last year's recession, not only did Airbnb take less damage than hotels, but they're even recovering faster too. For example, Airbnb's revenue dropped almost 30% last year, but Marriott and Hilton both saw larger crashes of over 50% each. And going into this year's recovery, Airbnb's revenue in the first quarter actually saw an increase of 5%, while the hotel giants somehow crashed by over 50% once again. Don't ask me why that is. I'm as shocked by it as you probably are, but I don't know. Airbnb is just a hot thing right now, and for some reason, people really seem to be liking it. It might even be turning into like some kind of really trendy thing where it's considered cooler or more authentic to live like a local when traveling. I don't know. It's kind of strange, but it's what we're seeing. Anyway, despite those positives, their stock has actually been getting crushed lately. After IPOing at the end of last year for around $120 a share, the stock quickly skyrocketed to a high of $220 before crashing all the way back down in just the past few months to the $140 range. That's a crash of about 35%. So now that we're only around 20 bucks higher than that previous IPO price, is this a good entry point for the stock? Well, there's no doubt that even at these levels, we're still talking about a very expensive stock because they're not currently profitable, which I'll show you in greater detail in just a second. But that means that we're not able to value the stock based on earnings, but instead we have to look at sales. And here we see that they hold a price to sales ratio of over 25. For context, a PS ratio of around 1 is generally considered a good value, and even high growth stocks still tend to be in the single digits and nowhere near the 20s range. Now, granted, that's a trailing ratio, and sales were obviously much lower in the past year because of the recession, but it's still considered extremely high regardless. I think the average PS ratio for the S&P 500 is like only 3, so this is somewhere around like, I don't know, 700% higher. Even a massive giant like Amazon has a PS ratio of less than 4, and they generate tens of billions in profits, which, by the way, is something that Airbnb is severely struggling with. When looking at net income in 2019, they lost hundreds of millions of dollars, which turned into billions last year. I can forgive last year because of the recession, but this is still something to be aware of. Still, there are reasons to be optimistic about their profitability if you're thinking longer term. First of all, free cash flow is generally considered a more accurate measure of profitability, especially for younger companies like this. And there we can see that they were actually profitable every year except for 2020 because of the recession. Plus, those profits should grow a lot more over time, just given the nature of their business. This isn't a high cost business where they have to go around building a ton of expensive and labor intensive infrastructure. Instead, all they really have to do is literally just keep the platform up and running and put the rest of the money into advertising and other growth generating initiatives. But overall, they should be able to generate some very high profit margins over time, since all the labor and infrastructure is already paid for by the hosts with their own houses and apartments. I mean, it's not like Airbnb has to go around building those, they just have to monetize them. And when you consider the huge market they operate in, it shouldn't be very hard. According to their own estimates, their total addressable market is worth over $3 trillion. For comparison, all of their sales last year were only less than $4 billion. Even if they only get a relatively small piece of that market, you're still talking about gigantic growth. So when I try to put all of this together and determine if this stock is a buy, gotta admit, guys, I am very torn on this one. I mean, I really feel like it's a 50-50 gamble just because there's so many things that I really like about Airbnb stock, but I still hold so many deep concerns as well. So let me just kind of summarize everything for you really quick, list off some of the pros and cons, my overall feeling, and what I plan to do myself. So when looking at the pros of Airbnb, first of all, this is a trend that I do not see going away or declining at all. I mean, I really think that this is only going to get bigger over time. When I talk to friends and they tell me about the trips that they're taking, they almost always mention Airbnb these days, which I'll give my opinion on in just a second. But for them, at least, it's something that they seem to really like. They like the fact that they can usually get cheaper prices. They like the fact that they can go with a big group and get a whole apartment or house and all the amenities that go along with it. So that's something that I think is only going to get bigger over time. But maybe more importantly than that is that I think the host market is going to really take off even more so than it already has. When I talk to friends and family, especially those that are heavily involved in real estate, they tell me that everyone is talking about Airbnb right now. People are buying up property like crazy for the sole purpose of renting it out on Airbnb. And I know multiple people, literally myself, I know multiple people that have purchased a home recently for that sole purpose of renting it out I can't speak, out on Airbnb. And I also know several people who are even trying to make this into a full-time career where that's all they want to do is buy property and rent it out as Airbnb. So this is not something that is going away. Now, what does that mean? That means that Airbnb prices are going to stay very, very low. Because as you saturate the market with more and more hosts, those hosts are going to compete with each other on price. And because for many of them, it's not their main source of income, because they don't have the corporate structure of hotels, they don't have the overhead, the maintenance costs, and all that stuff that hotels have to deal with, a lot of these people can actually offer very low prices. So they'll compete with each other, offer very low prices as the market gets more and more saturated, and hotels cannot compete with that. Hotels will go out of business if they try to compete with the low prices of Airbnb. So hotels are not a concern either. So I don't see a big threat from hotels, and I see this market gaining even massively larger over time. All of that bodes very well for Airbnb and their stock. However, this brings me to some of the cons. So when looking at hotels, I don't think hotels really have to be a threat to Airbnb. Hotels are not going to go away because some people just prefer hotels over Airbnb, and that's totally fine too. In fact, I'm one of them. I'm someone who doesn't get all the hype of Airbnb. I don't think I would ever use it, to be honest. And look, I get that I'm probably the minority in this. You probably think I'm insane for saying this, but I actually prefer the corporate structure of hotels. I like to know exactly what I'm going to get, and again, I have to emphasize the fact that this is personal to me because I'm sure everyone else doesn't have this kind of anxiety that I do, but if I was staying at someone else's house, I would constantly be worrying about, don't mess up the carpet, don't damage anything, make sure you leave everything the way it was when you first got there. Whereas with a hotel, I never think about those things. I mean, I could kind of, quote unquote, trash a hotel, and literally hotels will clean the room for you if you step out of the hotel for the day. They'll literally go in and clean for you. You don't ever worry about not damaging anything. I mean, for the most part, right? But you mostly just kind of do whatever you want in a hotel, and you're in, you're out. If you have any issues, there's people in the lobby. You always kind of know what to expect from a corporate, hotel chain. With Airbnbs, there's a little bit of a gamble there. I know there's reviews and stuff, but it's still a little bit of a gamble. You're never quite sure what you're going to get. And you always have the anxiety, or at least I do. I would have the anxiety of making sure I don't damage anything because it's actually some actual person that owns it, and I don't want to go through the hassle if they accuse me of something. So for me, I don't think I would enjoy it. I think it would ruin my trip, to be honest. So I don't get the hype of Airbnbs, but that's just my own personal concerns. I recognize that I'm probably in the minority of that. That's fine. The issue, though, for me is that I have an investing philosophy where I do not invest in companies unless I actually use their product or I at least like it. And I personally don't really like Airbnbs, so I'm not sure if this is a stock for me. However, again, that's just a personal thing. That's just one concern. Let me give you some more kind of broad concerns. And here's the biggest kind of broad concern that I can think of, and that is that I don't see any kind of barrier to entry for this market. Now, I said I don't think hotels are a threat, but I don't see why any other company can't just create a similar app and platform like Airbnb and compete with them. And I know that there's other booking agencies and stuff, but obviously nobody has done it as successfully as Airbnb, but I don't see a reason why there can't be another player that comes in and does it like Airbnb and just maybe lowers their commission fees. And then what happens? Airbnb has to lower their commission fees to compete, and that will hurt their profits. So, for example, say I start my own kind of version of Airbnb, and right now Airbnb charges what, like 15% kind of commission fee, something like that. Let's say I enter the market and I say, okay, I'll charge 13%. Then what happens? Does Airbnb compete with that price? What if I offer 10%? I mean, I could really lower prices by a lot. Now, there is one barrier to entry with Airbnb, and that is Airbnb Plus, I believe it's called, where they will literally help hosts to earn more money. They'll kind of move them up in the rankings and their visibility. And in exchange, those hosts have to be exclusive to Airbnb. So there you do have some exclusivity there. And I think that's something that Airbnb should be going all in on. Try to get everyone exclusive to Airbnb so that they can't list their properties on other sites, and that could, lower their competition. But at the moment, I'm pretty sure that the majority of listings are not Airbnb Plus, meaning that they're not exclusive, and I just don't see a big barrier to entry in this market, and that does kind of scare me a little bit because I think we could see some big competition in the future. Again, Airbnb has a very strong brand, so they might just, kind of be on top right now, and maybe they can ride that momentum and just stay on top in the future. But, it's still kind of something to be aware of. Now, the last concern I have, and this is the biggest one of all for me personally, is that I've just been buying too many speculative stocks lately. I would take a chance on Airbnb, to be honest. I really would, but I've been buying a lot of spec stocks lately, a lot of unprofitable companies, and I think right now I own like 5 different companies that are unprofitable in my portfolio, and that is too much for me. I mean, I really got to kind of slow down a little bit. And if you guys have been watching my videos lately, you know that I've been taking some chances on some pretty risky speculative stocks. So I'm going to have to sit out on this one for, I would say the 2 biggest reasons are because of the fact that I don't use their products and I don't really like them that much. So that might kind of make it harder for me to understand them. But the other concern, and this is the biggest one, is that I just own too many spec stocks at the moment. So I'm going to have to sit out on this one myself, even though my gut tells me to buy it, because my gut tells me that Airbnb is going to be much larger in the future. And I think they're probably going to be the market leader, which would be big because this is a big market. Man, it's a tough one. I really want to buy the stock, but I don't know. I think I'm going to wait a little bit. Maybe if the stock keeps falling, then I'll start buying in little by little, and hopefully it falls more and I can buy some more. But as of right now, yeah, just too many spec stocks, too many unprofitable companies in my portfolio. I got to slow down a little bit. I got to be a little more careful. So I'm going to sit out on this one for now. But let me know what you guys think. Let me know if this video swayed you in any particular direction. If you're thinking about buying the stock or if you already own it, I would love to hear your thoughts down below. Especially if you own it, I'd love to hear your reasons why. Maybe there's something that I missed and maybe that will persuade me to buy the stock myself. But as of right now, those are my feelings on it. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like I said, if there's any other stocks you want me to review next, let me know down below. I'll catch you guys in the next one. I hope you're all doing well. Stay safe out there. Take care. Bye-bye.